Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
Now, here's your host, Ed Cohen.
This is Ed in San Diego. It's April 26th and a little after 8 a.m. here. Yesterday and the day before, we've had summer in San Diego, temperature near 90. And today it's going to be 70, just to give you an idea of crazy weather patterns. But I'm ready for warm weather. And speaking about warm weather, we have Philip Berry. As you could see, there's a palm tree in his head over there. But it's real because you're coming to us from San Martin in the Caribbean. And welcome, Philip Berry. So you can work from anywhere. From anywhere, right?
Ed wanted to take me off of my vacation, so I said, fine, that's okay.
Right. Okay. So Dave Edick is about 10 miles from here in San Diego, east. And Dave, why don't you quickly introduce yourself while I get Marianne settled here?
Oh, okay. So, gosh, international guy for a generation. Lived and worked in Russia. Ran a food trading company. Worked investment banking out of Moscow for a Russian-British outfit, seafood export development out of Mexico, past president of the World Affairs Council here in San Diego, past headed the Sister Cities program in San Diego, and now consulting and really kind of looking for the next gig. So
Dave and I have yet to meet in person. He's only 10 miles from here. I'm like, God, I got to get off my ass and go visit you at that bar down in La Mesa there. But,
well, there's a war on. What can I say? You know.
Yeah, no, it's busy. Marianne, welcome. And hi, Marianne, and hi, Marella.
Thanks, I'm here.
Great, I like your hair. That's a new style, right?
Who is that you're speaking with?
Oh, you.
Oh.
I thought he was talking about Mike.
No, my hair is just turning white. I don't know. It doesn't go anywhere. So this is Marilla, and she's in Toronto, and she's human resource leader and in charge of immigration and mobility and some other things, I guess, for Zynga. Why don't you do a little bit better job, Marilla, and introduce yourself?
Well, you've given me a far bigger title than I want, so I'm
too many jobs, right?
Yes, I'm simply the Director of Immigration and Relocation at Zynga. I'm based in Toronto. I think I've met some of you guys on a previous call, so great to see some familiar faces and some new ones as well.
Yeah, you bet, and thank you again for being with us. So, Marianne, hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Are you going to be visible today, or are you going to remain in the shadow?
I'm not pretty, but sure, I'll be visible.
Oh, I think you're great. Okay, so recently Marianne and I did a
both
show.
In Martin here. What's this?
Yeah, look at that. It's just,
hey, what's going on here?
All about the tropics.
So I want you to share a banana with Philip. This is Philip. And then there's Marianne's in San Francisco. Oh, you wouldn't believe it. So, and I think, Marilla, you've met Marianne on a prior show some time ago where we had Global Voices for Change, and you guys are both in that category. All right, so we're going to start this talk show, and we're going to end it by 9 o'clock my time. Good. Everyone has other things to do today, so if you need to jump out earlier, that's quite all right. Philip, I want to go to you because you and I have had this discussion, and you have some things to say about what's going on right now. So Philip, take a couple of minutes and tell us about what's on your mind today.
Well, I think this conversation first started out with Ed and I regarding the whole concept of blue ocean. And so what I want to do is just to give you a framework so that way you understand what it is and how you go about creating a blue ocean. And what I'll do along the way, I mean, I'll do a short piece and then we can do Q&A, whatever, but
Yeah, it's good.
but I will intersperse at least 3 specific examples, so that way I'm able to demystify some of the theory that I'm talking about and get into the practical aspects of it. Because
Now you're going to get into EQ also, right?
well, let's see how much time we have, but yeah, I can do EQ also. Yeah, so in terms of Blue Ocean, what it is, it's a methodology that enables organizations, whether they're profit or not for profit, to develop new markets, create new demand, and develop new products and services. And essentially what it has to do with is how you can create demand and also create a new customer framework that's different than the one that you have now in order for your organization to be more profitable and also to differentiate itself, so that way you're providing value. And there's some specific things that you look at. For example, if we look at the framework of, say, an Apple computer, where what Apple did in terms of creating what we call a blue ocean as opposed to a red ocean would be all of the telephone companies just competing with each other the way they did. But there are 4 things that you really look at when you're looking at how you move from a red ocean to a blue ocean. Not only do you eliminate or reduce some of the areas that you might have been competing in before, but it has to do with creating value and also with creating a whole new framework for how the organization is going to operate. And so what Apple did essentially was they created a whole new market, by enabling organizations. And matter of fact, the reason Apple I like is because I'm a techie at first. I worked at IBM, I worked at digital equipment. So before I went into consumer products, I was working in those organizations. And so to be able to see a company coming about, which was creating color, which was creating different sizes and introduced the whole aspect of fun and entertainment, which also was able to move individuals and companies into a situation where the home computer was beginning to resonate more, because when I was at IBM, it really had to do with the company computer. What can we do there? So individuals weren't thinking about how they can do something at home. So the whole number of new customers and new framework came into place because of that, because of them creating and increasing their value in certain areas. One other specific example that I'll give, if many of you might be familiar with Cirque du Soleil. And so that's a whole organization. If you think about it, all of us were going to circuses. Cirque du Soleil came in with a whole new proposition where they said, well, what we want to do, let's eliminate animals. Let's eliminate the 3-ring circus. So that's where you get those, the eliminate and reduce. And then what they did was to increase the number of entertainment venues and models that they would use for entertainment, like with music, having themed type of perspectives, and also creating a lot more safety and fun, in the area. And from the standpoint of creating new demand, you had a whole new customer framework. When I was young, it was kids going to the circus. The new customers were individual or adults who would participate because Cirque du Soleil was like a theatrical type of an environment.
And
So
I saw it in Vegas more than once,
Yeah.
the Beatles music. It was wonderful.
Yeah, and they continue to have themes all along the way. So there's this concept that you have in Blue Ocean, which is different from Red Ocean. In Blue Ocean, in Red Ocean, you're saying, well, there are customers that I have, and I want to just maybe I'll lower the price, or I'll try to create some type of value. In Blue Ocean, you're saying, let me approach the non-customers. That is individuals who weren't even thinking about getting into this, but now they're doing that. So you think back at Apple, every year people are buying new iPhones or iPods or iPads, and they weren't even thinking about that before. So you have non-customers who all of a sudden became customers, and the industry grew up because of that. So they were able to differentiate themselves in that way. So I'll just stay with those few examples, just from the standpoint of just seeing the framework that you think about when you're thinking about Blue Ocean opposed to Red Ocean. And the last thing I want to say about it is that when you are creating a Blue Ocean, you're not really thinking about, it's not just trying to be competitive against those individuals who are players in the particular industry field that you're in. You want to create a whole new industry. And that's what Apple has done. That's what Cirque du Soleil has done. There are a number of other organizations have done that. And I can also talk about an organization that I consult with, where I developed a Blue Ocean strategy for them to help them. For example, very, very quickly, this is an organization made up of lawyers. So I won't name the particular group, of course. However, they were able to think about not only how can we just get more lawyers involved who are in the employee relations area, but how can we create new customers from a non-customer base, and that is from, sorry about that, from HR people and also individuals in the diversity field, because those who are handling employee relations type of situations. So those
it's really interesting. I just had a conversation, just to inject this a thought for 60 seconds. There's a law firm, a global law firm, it's based in Washington, D.C., that's just become a client. And we're going to be doing a series of talk shows called Legal Briefing. Anyway, more about that later. The partner who was on my show telling me about this said that they have taken that exact same approach to taking a holistic care approach of the client. It's not just immigration, which is their main specialty, but they've branched out into executive stuff and contracts and business and even diplomatic kind of relations from around the world. And there's one client that Liz, the partner who's my client, said that they fell into it, but it just seemed so logical to expand their services to take holistic care of the client, not just on immigration technicalities.
Exactly.
So this lady that you talked about, I'll be real brief. She's an immigrant from Sweden to be VP of HR in this pharmaceutical biotech company in Washington. And she set her up to be a guest interview on my show as a service for her to prove her value to the bigger world, not just within the company. And they took that broadcast recording and took it to the immigration meeting that they had for final review to get her certified to be able to work at the VP HR level for this biotech company in Washington. And they looked at that talk show in which we talked about the value that this person brings to the company and to the industry. And that added to the success of getting her approved for immigration status. Anyway, Philip, I'm sorry to take your time.
No, that's good. Yeah, I mean, we could talk a little bit more about it. I guess the most important thing is that this is not just a thought process. It's not a philosophy. There are some very specific analytical areas that you look at and some factors that you look at, from a standpoint of the customer. I could get into about 4 or 5 areas around the buyer, and how do we get more innovation by looking at buyer decisions, how individuals purchase items, and the whole area of convenience and service and all of that. I mean, those are areas that give organizations a competitive advantage by creating more value and differentiating themselves. And by eliminating and reducing certain areas, you can reduce your cost structure, because what you're doing is that you are eliminating the value that you put into certain things which aren't yielding the return on investment that you want. So you want to have new things coming into play. So
Interesting.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
And by airs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at airs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
Stop dreaming and start living overseas. International lifestyle consultant Emily Braun can help you seamlessly transition to your new life in your dream destination. Whether you are a retiree, a digital nomad, or a mobile executive, Emily Braun can make your transition overseas a success. Visit emilybraun.com.
Coutalis is a global group with a worldwide footprint. With 16 agencies in 10 countries, Coutalis offers companies and mobile professionals a unique combination of HR services and options. Find us at coutalis.com.
Take your communication skills to the next level. Barbara Bolt of Bolt Global has a passion to make you shine. As our globe expands, effective intercultural communication and presentation is a must. Visit boltglobal.com.
EQ, you spent years in running 60 countries for Colgate. So you had to develop, I mean, you baptism by fire, right? You had to learn the difference between how to do things in, say, Slovakia versus Guatemala. And I remember you talking to me about that at one time, and how, so that's EQ, isn't it?
yeah, it's EQ, and all, but it goes another level from the standpoint of CQ, which is the cultural quotient, because when you, in working overseas, I've been VP of HR for the International Business Development Group, which had all of Russia, all of Eastern Europe. I was opening, when the Berlin Wall came down, I was involved in opening full-fledged subsidiaries throughout Romania, Poland, Czech Republic, all of those areas, throughout the Middle East, like in Saudi, and throughout Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Cote d'Ivoire. And then also I had the Latin American division another time, then I had Asian division another time, and then lived over in Paris with the European division. And the only thing that I would say is that in order to be impactful, you can't go into countries, and I know that a number of you will appreciate this, you can't go into these countries like an American. You have to go in being able to be open-minded and to understand how people think, how they interact, understand the behavioral functions, because as you move up in the organization, what EQ really says is that you become more aware of yourself as an individual, you become more aware of the individuals that you're relating to, and also the organizational and country framework that you're operating in. So that way you can be effective and productive, and you can be viewed as a person who is just at home in China as you would be in Chile, or as I would be in Hungary, or anywhere else, in Saudi, for that framework. And so I think managers, leaders lose if they don't expand their framework to operate. That's, to me, what it means to operate on a global level. Well, we have a number of individuals who are on here, and you can understand how to do that even by the fact that you're working with remote teams. People are talking about remote teams. Remote teams have been in place for about 20-some years. When you're operating globally, each of you have been in that framework, and you understand that. And you understand that if you're working with a certain group, you understand body language, you understand what silence means, you understand when people are saying yes, that doesn't mean that I agree, it means that I hear you. I mean, all those type of subtle nuances in terms of understanding how to operate with other people is what makes you an impactful global leader.
Mark Nadich, you have experience in Big Pharma and SC Johnson.
Yeah, great points, Philip. I think the one word that comes to mind for me, you talked about cultural piece of it, which is so important. And I made a lot of mistakes early on in my career by not listening first. And I think, as you grow and mature, and it happened very early in my life, fortunately, that I got to learn from some of those mistakes. But it is really becoming a student of the culture, and having worked in many countries, as most of the people on this call have, it's such a critical piece to success, and respecting kind of the cultural historical piece as well.
Morella, please jump in on this.
Absolutely. And I was thinking that not so much in the context of a product or a service that, my current employer or past employers have offered, but as a leader in actually managing and working really closely with peers in a multicultural and diverse and global environment, it is, so absolutely critical to listen, to hear, to be aware, and to not make assumptions. I think that is definitely one of the biggest challenges that I have faced in assuming that, things play out in Asia in the same way that they play out in North America and Latin America. There are so many cross-cultural nuances that are critical to understanding your peers, your internal or external customers, and your potential colleagues and customers as well. And so I think this is fantastic. But Philip, as you were talking about IBM, I spent 13 years in IBM, also in HR. Our paths have never crossed.
I'm
definitely
being moved, right?
Yeah.
That's what it stood for.
That's
Yeah,
right.
being
But
moved.
definitely, it was a place where I got my first taste of what it's like to actually service internationally and globally, and truly understand that the moment you have made assumptions about anything, you're going down the wrong path. And sometimes our ego gets so much in the way of that, thinking, well, we know it all. And I think one of my early wake-up calls was, as you said, like when people said yes, thinking that they actually agreed with me, when in fact they were just acknowledging that they're hearing what I'm saying. And what I also remember is, people thinking, well, you're coming here from Canada or from North America head office, thinking that you know how things work here and what might be applicable and make sense and appeal to to those in that part of the world just doesn't work here. So that flexibility to bend and adjust, and most importantly, that starts with listening. And the moment we don't do that, we are definitely going down the wrong path.
Dave Vidic is a guy who you all need to meet. I'd like you to chat, exchange email and website info. Dave Vidic has for years been involved in the sister cities diplomatic business, relationship business. Dave?
Oh yeah, cultural sensitivity, listening. That's that's an art that is crucial to success. Even here in the U.S., it helps to listen. Talking louder rarely gets you much. And different cultures have different ways. Gosh. Opening up the Sister Cities program to Jalalabad, Afghanistan in 2005, that was a major cultural experience there. It's hard for me to describe, but and the body language, something that Philip mentioned here, that's actually something that became really important in the Jalalabad experience. Was that when the mayor came to San Diego for the signing of the agreement, and then to facilitate some of the exchange programs and training programs that came out of it. For him, it was a massive cultural shock to come here. I mean, it was his first trip outside of his first trip to North America, first trip to really deal with Americans in their own environment. And his reaction to how women dress, that was something that I picked up on, just the body language, and helped navigate really kind of a tricky moment through to success. And to help him appreciate the fact that he's on the road. And while in Jalalabad, we have to be aware, or Afghanistan, we have to be aware of the cultural sensitivities of many different cultures there. When people come here, helping them raise their awareness, their cultural sensitivity as well. Anyhow,
Interesting.
It was a lot of fun.
So, David, if you could help me change the subject a little bit and then get Philip back involved with the blue ocean idea. Dave, you and I have had the conversations a few times now about the Ukraine-Russia situation, and actually the bigger picture of the old Soviet push, Iron Curtain, enslaved people, and all. Now, all of a sudden, Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense show up. It looks like they did a good thing, and they're voice actualizing American power. It sort of reminds me of the old movie reels, news clips from Dean Acheson and Alan Dulles, Marshall Plan, force multiplier in Europe against Soviet aggression. So what do you think of all that? It's too much, huh?
It's blue ocean time.
Okay.
What is going on is changing. It's a historic swing of the door for Euro culture, if you will. North America, Europe, Russia. The rest of the world sees it a little differently at times, sometimes a lot differently. But the shocks that are coming out of this, I think it's tremendously unhelpful to look back for reference. If you do go back to World War I, and how all that happened and what came out of it, and while all the empires of that time, Ottoman Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, German Empire, Russian Empire, they either were completely destroyed or shattered and reformed with a tremendous social, political, and historical costs. It could be the same kind of a thing. But this really will change Europe. This will change Russia in a profound way. This is having huge. We're just getting started on the impacts in the energy sector. If indeed Europe, the EU moves forward with sanctions on Russian oil, we've been just kind of playing around the edges. You take 3-4 million barrels a day off the global market, you won't get an incremental change in price because everything's running very close to the edge in terms of supply and demand. Same thing with natural gas. I mean, as I look at this, there's very little blue ocean thinking going on, and that unnerves me because if you were toying with stuff that can really overturn the order in so many different ways, if you're not thinking in blue ocean terms, you're prone to serious policy errors or mistakes, and mistakes.
I want to go to human side of things. Dave Levine is an expert in the human side of things, and Mike Hibbert is an expert in the accounting world and dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and balances. So Dave, first, welcome.
Thanks. maybe Dave Edick can expand upon what he was just saying. I follow when Philip talks about blue ocean strategy and redefining the market in unique terms, bringing innovation, defining your unique differentiators. But I didn't follow how blue ocean thinking needs to apply to new policy, as Dave was just outlining about how would you apply blue ocean thinking? I can see it in terms of market and product development, but in terms of policy, your statement that it's not helpful to look backwards. How does blue ocean thinking apply to what's going on now in the economics of Europe and globally, and how that's impacted by this invasion?
Yeah,
I tell you one, well, maybe Dave, you could talk, but I tell you one thing that, is interesting. While I think that the blue ocean applies specifically in this way, and that is that one, thinking about, for example, and I'm not as up on the arrangement of who was buying oil, for example, from Russia. However, by being able to create a new demand situation where we're using electricity and solar, for example, and building upon those industries. We keep going back to the old way, of oil in the ground, and that's going to be a resource that will be used up soon. We need to think about creating new demand for individuals. So that's how the blue ocean piece comes in. It's creating a whole new demand framework for all of the countries that are just dependent upon just Russian oil. I think that's one thing. And then the other thing in terms of distribution frameworks, there are other countries in the world where oil can be purchased from if we're going to use that. We have to think about Nigeria. We have to think about Venezuela. I don't know all of the other places. Quite frankly, I'm not as adept on that, but I do know about those two countries only because I've been to both of them, and I know that they are rich in those type of oils. And what we can do is to begin to build new frameworks in terms of energy consumption. That's where the blue ocean comes in, so that we're not dependent upon old models and old ways of looking at things.
Okay.
Definitely thinking
you can see
outside
how
the
it kind
box.
of applies when you just open up your parameters and look at it in that way, as opposed to what I heard David saying is that, well, we're going back to this old framework of thinking, and I worked all throughout Eastern Europe when the Berlin Wall came down, and I spent a lot of time in Russia, Romania, Poland, Czech Republic, all of those places. And I remember the thinking process, and I remembered that younger people, when individuals wanted to move from what I call a command, I'm not even talking about communism, democracy, that's political. I'm talking about moving from a command economy to a market economy. And the younger people were willing, in those countries, were willing to do that. And so when I was working on acquisitions in those areas, greenfield operations and also acquisitions, what we were able to do was to get individuals who had new type of thinking processes and get them involved in creating more organizations that had a different market framework, which meant that they would have a different purpose and a raison d'etre, in terms of how they would apply their skills. I remember, last thing on it, I remember when I would talk with individuals and I would hire people in Russia, and I would look for individuals who had certain type. How do you get a person that has marketing skills? Well, I looked at individuals who did great research, agricultural studies, worked in the library systems. Those are the resumes. That's what they had on their resumes. And if they had that they worked for the Air Force Academy, then I knew they were KGB. So what happened was that, so I hired joint CIA and KGB people to help me understand how to navigate, and also for my own safety, quite frankly, in working, I had a lot of safety, and I could talk more about that a whole nother time. But the fact is that enabled me to have individuals in organizations who would think differently and then create blue ocean situations in the economics of their organizations that they were working for. That's how you do it.
It was always nice to have that Krisha or, the Babas in the neighborhood watching out for you.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Dave Levine, people aspect, taking care of people, a mental health situation going on out there in the world as a result of all these seismic changes.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that, and we can get back to how blue ocean applies to the policy thing. It's not completely clear, and I wanted to bridge that over, but I think I want to say we're sort of a subset on this group. And it's been said before, if we haven't been good listeners, if we haven't been able to adapt to not only the individual communication styles of who we're talking to, but the cultural baggage that we all bring, if we haven't been able to adapt in the global worlds that we've operated in, we will not have been successful. We'd not be on this call together. So I think that's a basic lesson that we take for granted. It can't be emphasized enough, because I think we are a subset of that, and we have had to become good listeners and adapt our value proposition to the individuals and the cultures in which we're working. This is a threshold moment in that, with the pandemic, the war, and the increased appreciation that has come to the emotional side of that, how it impacts people, how folks have had to adapt, how it generates more anxiety, depression, stress, in worst cases, suicides, all on the increase. There's an increased recognition for that, which is going on. And that does present some blue ocean opportunities. You see folks like Lyra, Spring Health, telehealth communication, telehealth counseling organizations that had a hard time 3 years ago finding their footing. But now that the traditional delivery of counseling services in the US and globally were taken away because you could not meet in person, those organizations really found a calling, because they were all set up. Their infrastructure was built to, and you could call it a blue ocean infrastructure. It's still counseling, still individual, listening to individuals and trying to help them negotiate their reactions to what's going on in the world or in their families. I think this is a good example of how blue ocean sort of has applied to our field of workplace-based employee counseling and wellness services. And we can capitalize on that further. I think the more traditional providers of those services, the Aetnas and the Optums and the Morneau Chappelle based in Toronto, where Mirella is, I think they're going to leverage that technology further. I think the traditional 55 to 60 minute psychotherapy session in the provider's office may be a thing of the past, and maybe people may opt for that. But I think by and large, we've seen a spike of telehealth counseling services, and I see that continuing as more the norm than the exception.
We are pleased to welcome Adamo Education as a proud sponsor of Global TV Talk Show.
The concept of a microschool is the reimagining of the one-room schoolhouse. My name is Tamara Becker. I'm the president and CEO of Adamo Education. The microschool concept really does not just lend itself to the personalization and the customization of learning, but also the social development and fostering that sense of love for learning. Unlike what we see in traditional brick and mortar schools, we have multiple grade levels in the same learning space. Students can be enriched by the socialization that they get, as well as the academic support from peers. What differentiates Adamo is the fact that we are taking the best pieces of brick and mortar, of digital, and then at-home learning. Students here can come 5 days a week. They can come 4 hours a day. It will really just depend on what is the best for the student and for the parent. To enroll, just reach out via phone, text, or email, and we'll have that personalized conversation, and we'll be able to get you all set. Check us out at adamoeducation.org.
Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture to Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
Dave, if I could just jump in and ask you a silly question here. Considering the rise of mental health counseling, are the counselors on the line asking people to lie down on a couch while they're doing telehealth?
No, but neither is a counselor in a private office. Rarely are they asking somebody to lie down on a couch. The more traditional Freudian psychotherapy is sort of a thing of the past, and it's really a thing of the past in the telehealth world.
Let's go.
Dave, you reminded me of an initiative I was working on that was specific to the expat and transferee population, but really dived a little deeper into, from a cultural perspective, what was acceptable and what was sort of common practice in terms of people's comfort level in seeking this kinds of counseling support and assistance, and specifically in going in with some preconceived notions that why wouldn't you go to therapy? It's available. It's part of your, your company's benefits package. Very quickly, I realized that in some parts of the world, particularly speaking to Asia, it was not very common. It was deemed socially unacceptable to talk about your problems, extremely difficult. There was an overarching fear by employees that any information that they disclosed in those counseling sessions would be shared with their employer. And as we were kind of looking at developing a global or enhancing our global expat coverage, it was really critical to understand our audience, particularly those individuals who originated from Asia and may have been deployed on assignment somewhere else in the world, that should they require those types of services, even though available, what they were comfortable with was going to be very different than your traditional employee out of North America who just loves to go sit on a couch or do a virtual session with a coach and has absolutely no hesitation to disclose and share those things, and absolutely has no fear that that information is going to be fed back to their employer and that could jeopardize their position and their role in the organization. So it's really interesting, Philip, as you talk about, one of your opening statements was really understanding your customer and your base and really directing your efforts on that basis. I got a taste of that in that particular project, and it was really surprising because, again, I went in with a whole bunch of biases and assumptions, and we really did have to reshape and reframe even the communication that we sent out about making these services available and building a little bit of comfort. And the text and language that was addressed to the North America population was very different than kind of talking about the confidentiality and the privacy of that, and that in fact, as the employer sponsoring these kinds of benefits programs, we literally had absolutely no insight into who was calling, how, yes, we had numbers in terms of 1,000 people called in for services, but that information would be kept completely confidential and private and never disclosed to the employee, no matter what the situation may be.
Sure.
Thank you, Marilla. We have 15 minutes left. Marianne recently hosted Tech Women, a group from Middle East, right, Marianne?
Middle East, Africa, South and Central Asia.
And these are women in San Francisco who were brought into San Francisco, Silicon Valley.
Correct.
And
112 women from 20 different countries.
So you were a den mother?
Yeah, really.
Kind of, sort of, but not really. These women are pretty spiffy and on their own. But I want to focus. I love this whole blue ocean concept, but at one point in my life, I was working in Zagreb, Croatia during the war in the former Yugoslavia. And I worked for the International Organization for Migration. It was the first time for me to work in a foreign country. Because I have Slavic heritage myself, I was confused for being one of the locals, but I am the furthest thing from Croatian you could possibly ever imagine. I don't smoke. I rarely eat red meat. I rarely drink. And it really did a head trip on me because I was hired to manage a group of locals who knew far more about what was going on in the former Yugoslavia than I did. So you guys are all speaking to my anthropological soul when it's about participant observation. You really need to pay attention to the clues that are going on around you and then where you can insert yourself. I had a blue ocean moment though, and I didn't realize that until just this conversation. I was there from September 94 to April of 95. So it's the dead of winter. Everybody smokes in the office, which nearly killed me. You can't open the windows because it's so cold. I worked on the 3rd floor of an office that was heated by coal. So when you get to work on a Monday morning, there's no heat until like the afternoon. So when they had a little farewell thing for me, they said, Marianne, the Croatian Ministry of Health has just banned smoking in offices. I'm like, my jaw dropped. I'm like, are you kidding me? They said, we thought that was your initiative. And I said, had I known, it would have been.
Isn't that interesting? Mike Hibbard, you've been hearing all this people talk now, but you're a number cruncher here, right? What do you have to say about all this? Oh no, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
not exactly, Ed, that's exactly how I describe myself in public, but that's fine. It's nice to have a European sort of perspective on this, so thanks for the invite. I think it's really interesting just listening to the other conversations. I think there's a lot of stuff. I was in the US on assignment in 2001 in New York. Just before I arrived in May, September 11 happened, and the organization I was part of then collapsed shortly afterwards. Massive shock, and the impact, it was very obvious that New York had changed then. And if you sort of almost transpose that into what's happening now in Europe, there's a lot of concern, and it's really probably more impactful on the youngsters, actually, sort of, teenagers who are really worried about their future. They've come out of COVID, everything was kind of weird for them. A combination of COVID and war in mainland Europe, there's a lot of depression and a lot of kind of mental health challenges.
Fear,
and
a lot of
probably,
fear.
yeah, exactly. And who knows what's going to happen next, because that's the challenge. So at one level, at a human level, there's a lot of anxiety, which is going to play out over the next 10 or 15 years as those people come into the workforce, and how we respond to that is going to be pretty impactful in terms of that, future generation. On the blue ocean piece, I like that thinking. I think if you apply it to policy, it's kind of interesting to see. Be interesting to see what actually happens where Russia heads next. What happens with the companies that are pretty embedded in the global market into Russia and the surrounding bloc, because I think it's one thing to make a public statement about not being in Russia anymore, but actually quite another thing to do it. So. Without naming names, there's an American consumer goods company that runs 80% of the milk production in Russia. So publicly, they're not in Russia anymore, but of course they're in Russia because they're running the milk production. And what do you do about that? So there's some real kind of dilemmas in terms of how you actually then. How do you apply blue sky thinking to that dilemma? Because on the one hand, you can't be there. On the other hand, you have to be there because the people you're punishing may not be the ones you intend.
Interesting.
Sorry,
Mark Nadich, if I can ask you a blue sky or blue ocean question about Elon Musk. So
Sure. You want to ask me that question?
Well, okay, you can deflect it to Philip. It's a
Don't deflect that one to me. You know.
so I couldn't think, I was reading all this stuff the past couple of days. So I thought of that Fiddler on the Roof song, If I Were a Rich Man, What Would I Do? So this guy's buying everything, right? And so what's he gonna do? And what's his thinking? Is it, I mean, he's in space, right?
Philip, you're going to be the man of the hour if you know what he's thinking.
Right.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, that's the difficulty. It's hard to understand what his thinking is, and I'm actually afraid for it because he throws out these aphorisms, about freedom and all of that. I don't know what that means, and I'm afraid of what it means, and I'm actually very concerned about it, and I'm surprised that Twitter went back in and did a deal with him. But I guess money speaks.
Money.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not happy about what will be coming because of the way his thinking process has been before. And he's rather quixotic, in terms of how he deals with things.
Well, he's got more money than anyone can imagine. And that's kind of one of the outcomes here the last few years is that there's a substantial subset at the highest levels of private equity and a handful of tech companies that have really succeeded, and their pockets are bulging, and Musk is one of them. And if money's no object, you can do all kinds of things. You can take you can launch spacecraft, and I'm not talking about SpaceX, but Twitter is an interesting one because he's had a lot of personal interaction with it. Some of it troubling or inconvenient. He's had a lot of fun with it. I use Twitter a lot, and one of the annoying things is it doesn't have an edit button. It's one of the social media channels where they've gotten into what is socially acceptable and ruling what is okay to talk about, which is where you got talking about the Russians here or stuff like that. You got to watch doing the same thing, just it's the same design with a different color pen. So anyways, it'd be interesting to see where it goes. But when somebody like that's when money is not an object in a capitalist culture, if with somebody that has the money, well, that's really interesting to talk about blue sky thinking right there.
We have, unfortunately, about 6 minutes remaining. Mike Hibbert, you need more time than 6 minutes, I know, but if you could take a couple of that and talk about this dilemma of people working from here and there and everywhere, and how do you pay them? And what's fair and equitable?
That is a big question. Maybe I can give a subset of something practical. So one of the consequences of the Ukraine war is there are a bunch of Ukrainian employees of most of the companies you'll all know who aren't in Ukraine anymore. So their access to money, funding, spending power as they migrate across Europe has been a real problem. And a lot of companies have been very ethical about how they deal with that. So how do you get money to someone who doesn't have a bank account? So something that probably none of us have had to deal with since we were probably students, and even then probably they were in place. So that whole kind of migration and virtual working from anywhere in Europe, which has been forced, brings with it all of those other challenges. How do you pay someone? Where do you pay them? What currency do you pay them in? How do you help them to set up home? You've probably seen some of the Airbnb, donating rooms and things like that. There's a lot of really positive energy in helping to solve that forced migration problem, which is a different version of virtual working. Moving Russian employees to UAE or Turkey because they can't be in Russia. How do you pay them? Their credit cards don't work, anything like that. So it's really brought, I suppose, more kind of creativity around how you actually get the funds to the people who need it in the right time frame, because payroll won't do it, and bank accounts won't necessarily do it on its own. So I think that challenge is probably live. We're helping some companies to solve that problem with some kind of some of our partnerships. But it's a really human challenge that is combining that virtual work with how do you get money for that virtual work to people who need it.
Mike, let me ask you a quick question here. I'm sorry. Isn't the answer just getting people from a source, whether it's Elon Musk or somebody else passing out the money, into the hands of the people who need it? And that means like issuing a debit card in the country where those people are at and fill it full of cash up to a certain level and pass out money that way.
Yeah, well, so debit and credit cards aren't always as easy to issue as that. There are some that are more global, but the issue is that there is quite a big. It's just a big undertaking. So it takes 3 to 4 weeks to get bank accounts in many countries because you have to go through, getting legal residence. And there are people who are in one country for 4 days, and then they're in the next country for 2 weeks, and then the next country. So it's a moving challenge. So just to give you an example, with one company, we've made 300 payments in 27 countries, and that's 2 weeks after, 2 to 3 weeks after the Ukraine crisis. So that migration has been even more pronounced since then.
Hey, everybody, reach out to Mike Hirberd with the chat. Philip, I know you have to scoot in 2 minutes.
No, I'm fine for now.
Okay.
But there's so much, so many areas that we could take this. What I love about this conversation is that I think it speaks to organizations and individuals being able to understand that we are in the midst of a paradigm shift. And that paradigm has to do with how we're dealing with each other, how people are responding, the whole issue that Marella brought up in terms of mental health issues, which are very prevalent, all over the place. I mean, there's so many, all of the dysfunction that we see occurring outside of organizations speaks to the need for organizations to be more involved in providing a steady force. So that way we have a sense of stability. But yeah, and it has to be new because we can't go back to the way things were before at all. We really can't. So
Morella, are you in the office or are you still working remotely?
No, I'm 100% mobile, so I'm at home. The office has reopened and people are making their way back. So I'm still happy at home. I don't mind giving up the 3-hour-a-day commute to the downtown Toronto area.
Yeah,
great.
I'd rather fly out and see you guys in California.
Yeah, it's good today. So Dave Edick, I'm sorry we didn't have much more time, but I mean we have time if you want to hang out here. But Dave, why don't you talk a little bit about the latest diplomatic push with Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense? It sounds pretty positive to me.
So a couple things. I just want to real quick. There's no extra oil around, guys.
Right.
I mean, that's the deal. You take what Russia has been supplying the world, and for political reasons, and for ethical reasons or whatever, want to remove that. The existing supply is going to be allocated by price, and prices are going to take off. And people that live in low-income countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, across Africa, South America, they are going to be the ones that are going to be faced with bills they can't pay. And I'm just saying that the politics of this are going to be immensely toxic. The rest of the world, much of the rest of the world does not see this the way we do. This is for many cultures, many countries, a replay of a movie they've seen several times over a couple generations, and they are always asked to pay the bill, to set aside their interests in favor of being on the right side of history or other set of interests. The we're coming to the end of this business cycle anyways, before the war. I think pretty much everybody on the call can agree that we kind of gotten to the end of things. We're not thinking that through from a policy perspective. What are the implications of the choices that we're about to make, and how the feedback effects of that are gonna come. In terms of Blinken and Austin's visit, I'm not close enough. The last 36 hours I've been off in a different space, so I really can't address that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that frankness. Mark Nadich, what's being a executive in residence really like?
Well, I'm going to tie it back to what we were just talking about. We were just talking about blue ocean strategy in class last week. So I think that, and I think academia, and I'm very new to it, but they're going through a renaissance as well. Is how do you create the students that are going to be able to help the world in a different way in the future. So I think that there's a lot of interesting ways in which you do that. One of the things that we've done as a university is really connect very closely to the business world in a business school. And I think that a lot of places have done that, but to be able to bring that really up close and starting internships in your freshman year and getting the experience and having to adjust in how you do education is really, really fascinating in this environment. But, we have lots of other bigger issues right now to deal with, as Dave and others have mentioned. But I do think that the blue ocean strategies are really important. I think the other thing that comes back to me often, as I've been doing a lot of reading on kind of the role of leaders today, is, and it was mentioned a number of different ways here, is the importance of leaders caring and the importance of leaders listening and commitment to the challenges that people have today, the amount of stress and challenge that people have in all of their lives because of everything that's happening. And I think, the word that I would use is, how can we continue to care even more?
Philip Berry.
No, I'm so sorry I have to go. This has been a wonderful conversation, and hopefully I can keep in touch with a number of you on LinkedIn or something like that. I enjoy future interchanges and learning and growing more. Thank you so much for everybody. Take care.
Phil, see you.
Bye.
Dave Edick, let's get together in La Mesa sometime. I want to introduce you to my life partner, Joanne. She raised her kids in Mount Helix area.
Great.
Yeah. So Mirella, thank you again for being on the show. It's great to see you. What's happened? So you're dealing with a bunch of young people, right? I mean, your whole population is what, under 30, right?
Oh my goodness. It's funny because I have an individual that we parked in Canada for a while we were working through some immigration issues for her. And she's of Korean descent. And she called me her Canadian mother. And I smiled and I think I know what she meant, but in that moment I felt extremely old. So definitely our population and the demographic is really young. I continue to be impressed by how smart these young kids are and how creative they are and how successful. But I think what strikes me more interestingly, and I think this kind of you would all understand that we're not in our 20s and 30s. The amount of self-assurance and confidence they have in who they are and what they bring to the table really helps them position very well. They are not shy to ask for a title change, for a promotion, to promote themselves, to be their biggest cheerleaders and their own biggest advocates, which I think is something that, I think back when I was in my early 20s and, working and starting out my career in PwC consulting, I would have never imagined myself like being that bold. And yes, I was confident, but in a very shy way, and not a way that I would go and storm into the office of a senior partner at PwC and say, well, I've been here 4 months and I think I've done a fabulous job and it's time for you to promote me. So I'm constantly amazed by the confidence that they have, the talent that we're bringing in. And one thing that I will share and then give the mic back to you is how much we have seen females in technology really stepped up and do amazing things. So I don't know if any folks or ladies from Zynga were any of in the recent forums that might have been led by one of your other guests, but definitely it is amazing to see how much more women are making an impact in technology. We had one individual who we were lucky enough to bring on to Zynga on a visa for extraordinary talent, the O visa, which is very difficult and very rare. And in working with the hiring manager and the immigration firm to see what this young lady has accomplished and how internationally renowned she is. And she probably sits in a group of maybe 5 individuals globally that can actually be successful in this extraordinary talent and unique skill set is fantastic. So, you know, I continue to be impressed by this young generation. And you know, you were touching on the whole concept of academia. And I think it's such an incredible opportunity that you're going to have, Mark, to actually, you know, help to foster these future leaders, these young, bright talents who are going to be comfortable in challenging the status quo in business and saying, well, why are you doing it like that? And having that, you know, executive who's had a particular style and concept for years in their mind being challenged to have a different perspective. So you're in a very unique and exciting opportunity there.
So Marilla, are you finding that, I think you just said it, but I just want to be sure for the audience sake, that the younger people, the young employees, are they adept at giving feedback, or have they pulled back? Are they hiding out?
Yeah, no, I don't think they're hiding out. I think they're, you know, again, it's a balance, right? I think at some point, you know, early on, they are a little shy, you know, they want to prove themselves, they want to do a really good job. But I think when they feel that they've made an impact, I think that they're a little bit more comfortable. Again, we are also in a very creative environment and anything goes, right? Like we're trying to make the coolest and the best video games out there. And that's about throwing anything and everything on the table. I think it also starts with the company culture and the environment, whether or not it fosters giving feedback, throwing crazy ideas on the table that, you know, you think it's probably going to be rejected and it turns out to be really brilliant. So I think the company culture plays a huge role in also, you know, allowing that creativity, giving that feedback, throwing out crazy ideas on the table. The question is, you know, the challenge is that once you throw it on the table, people are like, have bought into it. And now you have to like take the ball and run with it while you're doing 100 million other things. And I myself found that when I joined this company almost 2 years ago. They said no to no crazy idea, but then I realized, oh gosh, I've just signed myself up for a full plate when I already have one. How do I prioritize and what do I want to tackle first? So, you know.
And how did you do that?
Well, I just settled on a couple of projects that I thought were key and really kind of prioritizing what I think is really important, because we can't do it all. Like I can't go out to 7 RFPs and I can't change everything at the same time. But the most important thing is just knowing that you've got the backing of leadership to do that is really critical. And it takes some time as you adjust to a new organization to feel out just how committed they are to improvement and to change, right? Because everybody could say, oh yeah, like we were bringing you on because you have all this amazing experience and you could do it. And then when you put your business case forward, then it's like, no, then it's a little bit deflating. But when you're in that environment where you quickly realize that they're actually standing behind their intent to have you come in there and break it down and rebuild it in a different way, and that's embraced and welcome, is great to know. But it's just figuring that out, because a lot of organizations, I'm sure, like they're all for change when it comes down to actually putting it into place, They're not willing to move at the same pace that you thought that they were. They thought that they would, right? Because change comes hard, and the larger the organization, and we talked about this early on, and is just the adaptation of change in a cultural, diverse world. Like what I was able to accomplish in my last company when I was at Manulife, John Hancock, for almost 8 years, what I could do in North America in a matter of 6 to 12 months took 3 years to sell that same concept in a different part of the world, just because they weren't quite there yet. And so it's also recognizing that you can't go there and create a storm globally, but you almost have to kind of position things as, we're doing a pilot in North America, and we've gathered intelligence for the last 12 months how this pilot has been successful, and here's how we think it could help you in Asia or in Latin America. Would you be willing to try? So I think it's just even the approach of how you deal deal and approach those types of situations as well.
Mike Hibbert, thanks very much for joining us. I hope you found it useful enough that you might want to come back someday. But I also want to invite you to consider helping me stage a London conference. I'm not sure of the date. I'm talking with some others who I'm not going to name right now in terms of sponsoring, and that will be necessary in order for me to finance the whole thing. But it would be live and in person. Yeah, we'll be in a meeting room somewhere in London, and then we'll have a Zoom screen for the rest of the world. So please consider doing that. Mark Nadich, what do you got coming up in May? I mean, your world is like a rocket ship.
School is out in May, but I have been asked to help with the hiring of the next dean of the business school. So that is going to be a pretty significant project to work on, and it's very different than the business world. So I'm getting a lot of learning, and but it is wonderful and very collaborative kind of process. But just one point that you made earlier about the students. One of the things that I really love and respect about our students is the kind of commitment to think about things beyond themselves. And they really are committed to what's happening in the world, understanding it. They really also, in my opinion, are very committed to wanting to learn and learn from other people. And, so I'm really excited about kind of our future. I know there's lots of challenges in our world, but we also have a lot of great things that our next leaders are going to do. And I think they're going to have a lot of blue ocean strategies that they're going to help develop and implement. So with that, I have to run.
Thanks. Dave Edick, thank you very much for being involved again, and learn from you.
And from everyone here. This is really a great call.
Great. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all again. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. All right. This is Ed signing off in San Diego. Ciao.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.